From the subreddit TwoXChromosomes. IUD insertion shouldn't be painful. About 5 years ago I had an IUD placed and it was horribly painful. I've heard many similar stories from other women. A few months ago I was discussing birth control options with my male OB/GYN after having my son. I asked if it would be less painful to have an IUD placed now that I've had a baby. He said IUD insertion shouldn't be painful. I was like, well, it was. His response, maybe you're just extra sensitive, so I'm curious, am I extra sensitive? Or maybe this OB/GYN is really good at placing them? Or is it just because he's never had someone shove something through his cervix and into his uterus? I'm convinced that this is just one of those things that doctors have been repeating for so long, they don't even think about it critically. I don't understand how having an IUD inserted _wouldn't _T_ be painful. It requires putting an instrument through the cervical os. The cervix doesn't have great sensation, but it certainly has enough. Most women can feel pressure, like during sex, or scraping, like during a pap smear. The os is normally closed, it opens a bit when you menstruate, but not much, so that muscle is being stretched a bit just putting the IUD carrier into the uterus. Then you're uncoiling/unfolding a little plastic thing inside the lumen of the uterus. If it's properly sized, it doesn't distend the uterus much, but sticking something into a hollow muscular space is likely to cause cramping in response. That's one reason they knock you out for a colonoscopy. They inflate the intestine, which can cause painful cramps. Ha ha ha, your gyno is hilarious. Of course it is painful. Why wouldn't it be? No, you're not extra sensitive. It's a sensitive area and it's not like we have objects placed into our uteruses like that on a regular basis. It is definitely because he's never had the experience himself. I don't get painful periods, so when my uterus had spasms upon IUD insertion I nearly passed out. Just like painful periods was the comparison I was given. Instantly, I can't believe some people with uteruses have to deal with that level of pain every month. Scared face, y'all are superheroes. I mean, some doctors still believe women can't feel pain in their cervix because it has very little nerve endings they can fuck all the way off, because pain in my cervix literally feels like a corkscrew being twisted again and again. There was a comment thread on another sub a month or so ago. In many places IUD insertions, DNCs, and D&Es are all performed with no pain management. There were hundreds of comments agreeing with this, and the occasional horrified person who received analgesic care who didn't realize their care was not the standard or norm. I got an IUD put in at my local Planned Parenthood. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life, with the taking out process coming in a close second. It's horrifically painful. Your doctor is an ass. As a woman who only felt a slight discomfort getting mine, I 100% believe I am an anomaly. I'm worried about getting it removed in a couple of years' time. I've had 2 IUDs and both insertions were excruciatingly painful. I'm contemplating a third because of how effective it is for contraception. My gyno and I have come up with some ideas on how to hopefully make the process less painful. I would do some research into it. More women than not experience pretty severe pain. You aren't alone, and it seems like more doctors than not are oblivious to how painful insertion can be. I talked to my female OB/GYN for nearly an hour a few months ago about the options I had for birth control. We had a pretty in-depth conversation about IUDs. They are painful to insert. Literally every female I know who has one says this. If you do research on the internet, most literature about them says pain is a temporary side effect of insertion and should only last a short time. The pain is typically worse for women who have not given birth. My doctor told me she recommends for her patients to take ibuprofen before the procedure and that they could give you local anesthesia. Seriously, I don't care how great of a doctor people claim they are, I will never see another male OB/GYN. I have had 2 IUDs inserted and removed, and the insertion both times was some of the most discomfort and pain I have felt. It's not you. I hope your circumstances make a doctor with a more respectful attitude available to you. You deserve to be heard and have compassionate care. I'm so sorry this happened to you. It was excruciating and I literally screamed in pain. The only other time I've screamed in pain like that was when my wisdom tooth was extracted without being properly numbed. That doctor is a piece of shit. You have a really bad gynecologist who either A, has never inserted an IUD, B, had absolutely no bedside manner and has somehow ignored the pain of every patient he's ever had. Those are literally the only 2 options. Most women find it painful, the only debate is how painful, with most women landing on quite a fucking bit. I've had 9 kidney stones and none of them were as painful as my IUD insertion. It's bullshit. They're jamming something into an organ in the opposite direction things are meant to move from it. It can sting to get a pap smear, and that's a lot simpler and less invasive. My IUD insertion was so bad that when I woke up from general anesthesia I was screaming in pain. Of fucking course it hurts. It might not hurt some as much, but I think it hurts more people than not. Not an IUD but Nexplanon. The first time I had it placed, the doctor told me it wouldn't hurt, and even when I screamed in agony she told me it didn't really hurt. The second time I got it placed with a different doctor and mentioned that it was extremely painful the first time. He was like, "No, it shouldn't hurt." And then he placed it and, nothing. I didn't even realize he'd done it. Apparently the first doctor didn't give the anesthetic enough time to take before inserting it, so I felt everything the first time. Edit, I always see people say it's weird for men to be gynos, but this guy is the best. The female gyno I had before was a lot more like the stereotypical male doctor. Greater than he said IUD insertion shouldn't be painful. Does he have a cervix, and has he ever had anything inserted into? There still seems to be the idea that because the cervix has fewer nerve endings that any pain will really just be pressure/minor discomfort. Which is bullshit. Sure, individual women may have more or less pain when something's being inserted into, or scraping or taking a biopsy of, their cervix, but that doesn't mean there isn't still pain, full stop. You're not extra sensitive. You're having your cervix opened up and having a bead of metal/plastic shoved up in yours. They do it with no anesthetic and say just take Tylenol, it'll help. It doesn't help. This rhetoric reminds me of how miscarriage is sometimes described as bad menstrual cramps, but people who have experienced miscarriage often report that this is nonsense and miscarriage is incredibly painful, and more akin to labor than cramps, or, if your menstrual cramps are normally that bad, you shouldn't have to accept that, it is not typical. I've only been through two things more painful than my IUD insertion: attempted cephalic version, turning baby manually when they are breech, and uterine saline injection. I've had 3 IUDs placed and it was awful. Brief but awful. Your drive is wrong and arrogant to think that shoving a piece of plastic or copper up your closed cervix shouldn't be painful. Well, this comment section has further cemented my decision not to get an IUD, and I will continue taking my birth control. I have to take birth control for ovarian cysts, and a few people have tried to encourage me to get an IUD, which I have no desire to do, and now even less desire. My doctors have all been very shocked when my IUD insertion doesn't hurt, which tells me most women find it pretty damn painful. And now I know my cervix is a tank, as well. It's startling. It was very downplayed before I got mine too, and I was not scared or worried at all, and it literally took my breath away. It's the closest I've ever come to fainting. It's shocking because it's a sensation and mechanism of pain I never felt before. I mean, they say it's cramping, and I've had cramps, I can deal with that, but that's not how I would describe the sensation. It felt like an internal organ I was never aware of previously was briefly electrocuted. In summary, your doctor is an ass clown. I don't think it's impossible for men to be good gynecologists, I really don't. But my current doctor and the doctor who placed my IUD both have had IUDs themselves, and I appreciate that. Not that it made the actual placement less painful, lol. I had a woman nurse practitioner tell me a pelvic exam shouldn't be painful. So am I crazy here? I feel like the medical field acts as though women have to be used to pain, so it's not a big deal to feel pain during procedures. IUD is definitely painful. I was warned beforehand, given pain meds, and the first week was still absolutely hell. Very grateful the clinic made me have a get-home plan after insertion because no way was I driving. Apparently after birth is easier. However, that male doctor clearly doesn't use critical reasoning often. Everyone is different. I have a high pain tolerance. It just felt like another horrible period cramp to me, but others find it unbearable. I love my IUD like a child. It has legit changed my life and allowed me to live a more normal life that is no longer dictated by debilitating symptoms. No, they're not sensitive, it is painful. I suggest finding a new option. This is so weird to me because when I first got my IUD, the certified nurse midwife told me that it was going to hurt like hell. She said it would only be for a few seconds, but that I was going to hate it very much. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I just cannot comprehend that so many doctors and nurses portray this idea that it might just be slightly uncomfortable. I literally cried when I had it inserted. It felt like natural childbirth for me. I screamed. I hadn't had kids yet though. Opted for mini pill and then husband vasectomy, won't be doing an IUD again. It hurts like hell. You're normal. My first one was absolutely horrid. The second not so much, but I had the first removed and the second put back in the same procedure. Your OB sounds like the typical male OB who really doesn't know what he's talking about.